Welcome back to another edition of the Commitment Issues Podcast. I'm Woody Womack. I'm back. I feel like I haven't been on this show in forever. I'm joined by Nick Kruger. Nick, have you missed me or what?
Yeah, we've missed you. We've been talking about you, and it does feel like you haven't been on in forever because that's exactly what's been the case right now.
Well, had you only woken me up when you were supposed to, we were in Dallas, we would have had the 3-man episode that we've longed to record. So,
I'm not going to talk about trying to wake you up in the morning. That's not.
Yeah, it's not that hard, but it's not that easy either. So let's jump right into it. We've got all kinds of topics, surprisingly, because it's kind of a cool time of year for recruiting in terms of news and everything. We got a lot of kids committing before their senior season starts. Guys like to lock in their position in case there's any type of injuries or anything like that. But a lot of off-the-field news. I want to start with Trey Smith, a guy that people ask you a lot of questions about, Nick. He's a 4-star offensive lineman from Tennessee. A lot of other sites have him ranked in the top 20 now, I believe. I think he's dropped on a few sites after his performance at the opening. Of course, we don't have him in the Rivals 250. We still have him as a 4-star. I anticipate him moving up some based on what we saw from the opening in terms of the video we got out of that event. Obviously, we're not allowed to cover that event, so we have to rely on the video. But the big news regarding him this week was Tennessee deciding to hire his older sister, bring her into the fold in the football ops, I believe is what we've termed it. And, a lot of people are curious as to what that means for his recruitment. Personally, me, I think it basically seals it up. I think you go and hire a family member, I mean, especially his sister. From my understanding of his family situation, his mom died when he was younger, so his sister's kind of filled that void a little bit over the last few years, and I think it's a big deal. What's your take from the outside? I know you're not following his recruitment, but what do you think about the move of bringing in a family member like that?
Well, this isn't the first time that we've seen something like this sort of move, and often frequently it happens too with maybe a high school coach or some other trainer that kind of sends up a flare that this commitment might be happening for a specific kid based on relationship or whatever. So it's not something that I think is uncommon, and it's not something that I think is unreasonable either. I mean, I'm sure she's very qualified in her position of football ops and whatever that might entail, that she could get that job on her own merit. I don't put nothing past her.
Yeah, I think
the bigger question, do you think she's better at football ops than he was at the opening? That's the bigger question.
Oh, geez. I'll take a no comment on that one. I think, you mentioned her resume. She was working at the NCAA before. I believe she was a student manager at Tennessee under Pat Summitt there, so for the women's basketball team, which is interesting because I often get made fun of by recruiting fans for them telling me that I was probably the manager of my high school football team. Which, if any of these people saw me in person, they would realize that they're sorely mistaken based on my athletic ability.
That's right,
yeah. I mean, speaking of Tennessee, Paul Fortenberry's been ducking me on the basketball court for at least 2 years after the last time he saw me hit some jump shots. So,
it was a real drop the mic scenario for him. He comes out and has a good showing for himself, and then does the George Costanza, ends on a high note, and never wants to play again, right? So
that's right. Paul is a very good basketball player, but so getting back to Trey, I mean, I had been told by a couple people who were around him at the opening, including his roommate, that he was all set for Notre Dame, which kind of surprised me because, Ole Miss has been in the mix, Alabama's been in the mix, but I just don't see a scenario in which, his sister's going to work in football ops, which it really, we talked about it off the air, it really sounds like a covert, SEAL Team 6 or whatever. Yeah. But I can't see a situation where she's, she went to Tennessee, she's living there, for family reasons. He's from Jackson, Tennessee, which, is in the state, but is about, I think, 5 hours away from Knoxville. So it's pretty far, especially if you compare it to Tuscaloosa or Oxford, Mississippi. So I think for him to go, relatively far away from home, I think that really seals the deal for the Vols. And then their fans can just continue to call me names and get after me on the message board. And related to his related to his ranking. It's just a tough situation. We can talk about his ranking for a minute if you want. Um, you know, Trey's a
Well,
guy that
I haven't watched I haven't been able to watch the stuff from the opening like you have. So you're definitely going to have more of a point of reference on him than I would. So
Yeah, well, so the controversy is he was initially in the Rivals 250 that came out, I think, last year at this time. He was somewhere in the 190 to 200 range. We had hoped to see him during the fall. You and I actually had hoped to get out there, looked at the schedule. Tim Sullivan, who now works for our Virginia Tech site, went to watch him play against, I believe, Chase Hayden's team, and said, he's probably a four-star guy. Just didn't give him the special tag, and then he came to the Future 50 in Orlando, wasn't able to work out there. We were hoping to see him there against some of the best guys, and then we didn't see him at any camp events in the spring. I think he went to the Nike camp in Chicago, which obviously is not something that we can go to. And we did have Andrew Ivins there, who at that time worked for our Notre Dame site. He said he saw him as a solid four-star as well. And then we have the opening video where he didn't finish at the top 5 at his position there. So, that's the kind of the rationale. It's tough, and you can speak to this even though you don't know Trey. It's tough to rank guys, especially on the offensive line, who don't play against any other Division I talent. I mean, I think a lot of evaluating guys in games comes where you can go see a big matchup. I mean, when you and I pick a game to go to on a Friday, we want to see ideally a four-star against a four-star at that specific position so you can actually watch the battle. I mean, that's where we saw Mitch Hyatt excel, dating all the way back to him going against Robert Kimdichie. So, I mean, it's just tough. I mean, don't you agree?
yeah, and I remember another time we saw Mitch Hyatt go up against Lorenzo. Was it Lorenzo Carter? I think his name is.
Yeah.
The Georgia commit, and that was a pretty interesting watch between the two of them. And I did a whole video of the 15 reps where they actually went up one-on-one against each other, and it's real interesting to watch it that way. Even when you're watching, we have re-rankings coming up for both classes here shortly, and like you're going back through the tape and you see an offensive lineman's film from the high school season, and they're just plowing dudes' faces into the ground, and you have to remind yourself to like look at the height differential, the size differential between the defensive linemen that he's going up against in that highlight film. So it really does make a difference to see people in person and get a closer look at how quick they move and how strong they actually are. Because sometimes when you're watching it through a camera lens, it doesn't always tell the whole story.
Yeah, and generally, if a rule of thumb, if the defensive lineman looks like me, then it's not worth a whole lot. So, moving on to another potential package deal, something that we've also seen in recent years done by this particular school. The University of Georgia made big news. Actually didn't make big news because maybe not everybody realizes, but Deangelo Gibbs is a prime target for Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia, and a few other schools. His cousin, the son of Jake Reed, former Minnesota Vikings receiver that we all loved. I think was he number 86 back in the day? Probably. His son was at Tulsa, and him and Deangelo are very close. Deangelo goes out there and trains with Jake, works out in Texas, does a lot of that stuff in the summer, Christmas break, spring break, stuff like that. So his J.R. Reed was at Tulsa, and there was word coming down that potentially the two of them wanted to play together. He was looking to transfer. Tennessee was interested. Georgia was interested. He ends up transferring to Georgia. Now, I'm not sure if he's enrolled on campus or anything like that, but I can tell you that, from what I heard, sources close to the situation say that, Tennessee was not happy that they ended up getting him. Obviously, they got D'Angelo's other cousin, Nigel Warrior, on the team. Currently, he signed it in February. So, but, from what I gather, I think, this basically seals Georgia's position with Gibbs. I think there's a possibility he could already be committed. I mean, we hear a lot about Georgia having all these silent commits. I personally think it's a done deal now, similar to Trey Smith. And, we saw this happen with, our good friend Jonathan Ledbetter. His brother transferred into Georgia last year, I believe. He was a college basketball player. He transferred in to play football. I'm not sure if he's seen any time on the field yet, but it's like you said, it's commonplace with some of these things happening, and I think getting the cousin in, the cousin deciding that's where he's going to go. Maybe he decided that's where he's going to go because Deangelo told him that's where he's going. So,
no, it's really funny. And I've talked about this a few times, a number of times over the past couple of weeks. The number of kids from Texas this year that are all accumulating up in Iowa, and it seems like it's mostly driven by the fact that they've all built relationships with each other and all. Because very often you talk to kids and you say, oh, I know you're best friends with this kid, or so on and so forth. Does that impact your recruitment? And sometimes they'll say yes, and it never does. I feel like this year more so than what I've been accustomed to hearing and learning about in past seasons. I feel like it's becoming more and more of a common thing for people to actually make that connection, and make good on the connection between having an established relationship at a place before committing there.
Yeah, so all signs right now point to Deangelo going to Georgia. I think probably before the season starts would be my personal projection. I think I would expect a commitment to come from him, if it's not already been done behind the scenes. And then when that happens, it's obviously going to trigger some other guys, which we can talk about next week. Some other commitments coming up. So, a guy that you and I were both friendly with, at least during his high school years, we made the trip down to South Georgia several times to see Raekwon McMillan. He was a 5-star linebacker, at least on Rivals. I know the local newspaper, I remember saying he wasn't even the best linebacker in the state, let alone the country. Unfortunately, they're looking like they were wrong a little bit.
Who did they say was the best linebacker in the state?
I can't remember. It was the guy, the guy who at that time would gladly talk about how everyone was a 5-star that wasn't a 5-star, and vice versa. So, he's still in that job. He's still doing well there. So good for him. But we loved Raekwon. I think we saw him transitioning very well to college. He has done well. But he told a story this week at Big Ten Media Day saying that when he was in high school, he went to South Carolina for a visit, and Steve Spurrier didn't even know who he was. So, the poor old ball coach has been getting dragged through the mud. This is why. This is a classic example. But I think you and I have both heard. I know I have.
No, he was. Remember, there was a couple years ago on signing day. He was on national television. Didn't know any, doing an interview on live TV. Didn't know any of the kids' names. And I think they either came back to him for a follow-up interview, or he just stammered his way through until he could get a sheet of paper in his palm, and you could see him kind of looking down on camera. I think at some point he might have just had both hands on it and just totally was unapologetic about it. But I saw for myself he didn't know who the kids were that they were getting commitments from on that day, not just who they were recruiting.
So it was tough for Spurrier there at the end. I think a lot of these older coaches, at my alma mater, George O'Leary would notoriously, I could tell, he never knew who any of the kids were when we would go to the signing day press conferences to cover it. I think, Bill Snyder, I just think a lot of these guys, especially these head football coaches at that point, are kind of I guess in CEO mode, where they don't necessarily know the kids. They delegate to their staffs. They expect them to do a lot of stuff. And so I'll defend Spurrier a little bit on that one. I know I've heard stories from people related to Urban Meyer with a similar story of Urban not knowing who somebody was. And boy,
but here's the thing. So it's two parts, right? When we interview the kids and we say, who do you have the best relationship with, coaching wise? And they almost always say the assistant coach or the recruiting coach in their area. It's not ever hardly the head coach. I mean, most of the kids you talk to say, they'll only talk to the coach when they get on campus and stuff anyway, and that's when they're farther along in the recruiting process. But at the time, we're talking about Steve Spurrier having that moment on television that I was referring to earlier. But I think at that point, they weren't competing well in the SEC, and he was on his way. I mean, he was on his way out anyway at that point, right? And he was just kind of coasting through.
Yeah. There was a lot of concern about it was affecting their recruiting because was he going to retire 2 to 3 years? Or I remember there was all kinds of controversy.
I would expect more head coaches that are in a little bit more of a hot seat scenario, or have an ascending program. How many recruits do you think Jim Harbaugh knows by name or has spoken to personally? We always use him as the litmus test for everything in college football.
Yeah. Well, and I have that discussion with a lot of, especially some of the schools out west. You know, they take the coaches are on vacation in July and stuff like that. Down here, and I mean, you were at a camp the other night. I've been at camps, et cetera. You know, these teams don't stop recruiting. Like they take a little vacation during the dead period, but if they're allowed to be recruiting, they're recruiting and they're having kids on campus. So, you know, that's the big difference. That's the biggest thing I've seen. People talk about the talent. I think it's the effort put in by the coaches. Like you said, Harbaugh's, you know, he knows everybody's name when he shows up. I mean, even, you know, Jim McElwain, who I had never met before in my life, came up to me at a satellite camp and was like, "Yeah, Woody, how's it going?" And like, you know, acted like we'd known each other for years. So the fact that they know,
this is your humble brag of the show,
right? Well, but I'm saying that the fact that these coaches know who,
because Charlie Strong
who
had no idea who I was at Big 12 Media Day.
well, the fact that these coaches know jabronis like me, that means that they should probably know who the kids are that we're writing about, obviously. So, you know, I think it was a rough end for Spurrier. I think, you know, but guess what? You know, he did a lot of good things there at South Carolina that can't be overlooked. So, you know, spare the old ball coach. We like him. I think, boy, I'd love to have him on the show. Maybe I'll send him this segment and see if we can't get him booked as a guest. So
that might be the end of Rob's seat on the podcast if we can get him as a recurring.
Boy, imagine the amount of drops we could have of Spurrier going, well. All right. So listen, we got a couple quarterback commitments coming up. Given my proclivity to make bold predictions and be correct, I think longtime listeners of the show will know that I predicted Art Briles would be fired right before it happened. I predicted Tate Martell would decommit from Texas A&M. I predicted Kyle Allen would transfer from Texas A&M. So watch out, Texas A&M. You know, negative predictions your way have been positive for me so far. And then Rob and I both predicted that the Cavs would win in 7, which really I think goes down as one of the dumbest things we ever did, not betting on that, considering that we predicted it would happen. So Trevor Lawrence and Emory Jones, two top quarterbacks in the class of 2018 here in the state of Georgia. Lawrence, perhaps the number one player in the country. We still have to do the rankings. But he's ranked in the top 5 pretty much everywhere you see. He's down to Georgia and Clemson. You know, he's been talking to me a little bit off the record, but he hasn't given me any type of you know, idea where he's going just yet. But I think it's got to be Georgia. I think, you know, both of those schools, it's interesting. Both those schools are loaded at quarterback. I mean, you look at Jacob Eason being a freshman at Georgia. Once Deshaun Watson leaves, there's a couple. There's Kelly Bryant and Zarek Cooper behind him. Not to mention they have Hunter Johnson coming in 2017.
I like Trevor Lawrence way better than any of the two guys on Clemson you just mentioned, though. I feel like he would come in and pass them in a second.
Yeah, you think so? I mean,
Yeah.
you know, the debate is on at Hunter Johnson, and guess what? When I'm going to come strong on rankings meetings because.
I forgot about Hunter Johnson. I'm sorry. I thought I was talking about Cooper and who are the guys that you said were behind what?
I said Zarek Cooper and Kelly Bryant, our boy.
Yeah.
But those guys are more the prototypical Clemson quarterback than Hunter is in terms of, you know, mobility and stuff like that. I think Cooper can be a star in college too once he
moves to receiver.
Yeah. No, listen, he was on the upswing. You know, trust me. So I like him a lot. You know, and you know, I tend to like Clemson quarterbacks regardless, dating back to Deshaun Watson. So I think, but I think it's going to be George. There's so much local pressure around here on him, and the fact that he's wanting to get it over with and commit right now, I think he's going to Georgia. So lock that prediction in. You got a prediction on him? I know you haven't talked to him a whole ton, but you've seen him.
Well, I mean, the only thing I'll say is based on everything that he's said and kind of like his body language during the times that, you know, you've interviewed him when I've been around. I don't know I don't honestly know how much like communal pressure plays into his decision because he just kind of seems pretty, you know, pretty aloof.
He's pretty laid back, huh?
Yeah, but I mean, you know, you would know better than me. I mean, I'll go with Georgia too because you picked them.
All right, and then we have Emory Jones, who might be a 5-star guy. We have to discuss that on the rankings call. I think that's going to be heavily talked about. You know, he's really lit it up this offseason. Doesn't have a ton of great film because of the offense they run. There's some comparisons to Bryce Ramsey there, which, makes me really nervous, as I was never a big fan of his in high school, and we ended up leaving him in the 250, and now he's the first ever Rivals 250 punter. Will
he get drafted higher at punter than Brian Anger did when my Jaguars took him in the 3rd round?
Yeah, well, just keep him away from the old axe there in the locker room, right? So Emory Jones, I think the writing's on the wall for him to commit to Ohio State. We saw Tennessee offer Justin Fields, who's a 2018 quarterback from Georgia, as well. It looked like Emory was bound for Tennessee. I remember him actually texting me one night asking me, should I commit to Tennessee? And I was like,
if you said whatever you say right now, the Tennessee fans are going to blame you for him not committing. Whatever you say.
I told him, I said, Emory, those are not the kind of questions you ask reporters. I was like, that's what you talk to your coach and your parents about, man.
Yeah,
so
right.
I can't give you any advice. And that's a common thing. Kids sometimes, especially quarterbacks, seem to ask.
Coach Woody, where should I go?
Hey, Coach Woody, where'd you go to school? Like, I went to UCF, so don't. Well, they got a nice offense, but don't go there. So anyway, I don't know. It's a tough situation because Jones has really been flipping back and forth. Ohio State has been his dream school. He is a country boy though from Georgia. So I think with him, even if he commits, I think there's going to be some moving parts still in place. But I think Ohio State probably the pick there. And I think both of these guys honestly could commit before our next episode. That's why I kind of wanted to talk about it today. So.
Mm-hmm.
So get ready, people. It could be coming down any day on that front. So interesting week for us. I guess we were both on the road last weekend, which I'm so worn out and tired of traveling. I'm so glad to be home. I was at LSU, and actually while I was at LSU, I believe a kid from Texas, Kerry Vincent, a 4-star DB, committed. Was he there? I can't remember if he was there on campus or not.
He was when I talked to him to write his story about his commitment, but usually if that was the case, it's not because he's there to camp, right? I mean, he was just
right. No, he was just there. He was there hanging out. We had a lot of these schools doing these big barbecue type things, which, by the way, I was not invited to stick around and eat some of the food, which was kind of disappointing. Les Miles, I'm looking at you. But the LSU camp, which comes in as having
here's the
a
thing:
reputation.
you can't tell a kid not to go to don't ask you for recruiting advice, and then blast the coaches on your next statement for not feeding you when you're on campus. It doesn't go both ways. You got to get.
Listen, media meal could be provided. I mean, put me in a separate room. Just give me some of that shrimp gumbo or whatever you were giving the kids down there in Louisiana. I think I ended up getting a hamburger that was pretty good from a place in Baton Rouge, which I can't say it was my favorite unofficial visit of the summer, but we'll leave it at that. In terms of LSU's camp, it comes in as having this reputation of being this loaded affair and blah blah blah. I mean, I know that people who've covered it for us in the past have said how great of an event it is, and usually there's national media there. So this year I come down. This is my first year covering Louisiana, and I have to say, Nick, I was not super impressed. I just don't think the talent level was there. I'd say there was a lot of 2- and 3-star level guys. There was probably about, over the 4 days I was there, 15 to 24 stars. I mean, so it wasn't a whole lot of talent, which kind of, I think is a sign of these kids are just worn out, man. By the time the end of July rolls around, and these guys have been going to camps since February, right? I mean, it's basically 6 months of almost every weekend doing something. And I just think that they're tired. I think a lot of these schools are going to have to reevaluate, do we want to have our big camp event in July anymore? Because, or do we just make it a big barbecue or whatever? Because it seems like the kids are burnt out.
Yeah. Well, I feel like the barbecue as an event is a good motivator for the kids. I've heard lots of kids talk about wanting to go to those barbecues. I think LSU too. without looking at calendars in front of me, I feel like LSU is pretty proactive on the camp circuit this offseason. So they might have seen things earlier in their run of camps that they didn't need to see at this point. And you look at their class now. I mean, they've already got 18 commitments for 2017. There's not a, I don't know what people feel like the the opportunity is left, except for a couple of specific kids in that class, So who knows?
Well,
I don't know.
yeah, they do have a camp earlier in June, which we did not attend because it was during the 5-Star Challenge. But I did want to talk about there was a lot of talk about quarterbacks out there. Jack Tuttle, a 4-star from California, was there actually throwing all 4 days, I believe, which was pretty crazy, including on Sunday, where he was the only quarterback the coaches had throw during one-on-one. So, I mean, he took a ton of reps. Justin Rogers, who's an in-state 4-star quarterback guy I really like, he was there working out on Thursday, and he really lit it up. I mean, he actually was better than Lowell Narcisse, their 2017 commitment. He was better than Tuttle. He was better than any other quarterbacks they had out there, even your boy Jalen Maiden, who made an appearance, and he got the offer. So I think he's locked in. I think Tuttle, personally, spending 4 days there means he's real high on LSU. So that leaves your boy Dinkelman. Is that his name? Dunkelman? What's the
Zadok Dinkelman? Yeah.
Yeah, boy, if that's a quarterback's name, if I've ever heard one. He's committed to LSU right now, but he was nowhere to be found. As far as I know, he didn't visit this summer. And so I kind of got into a debate with the LSU fans on the message board on tigerbait.com, our LSU site, where they said there's no way they'll drop Dinkelman for these two. They don't want to hurt relationships in Texas. So what's your take on that? I mean, you talked to him. I know you did a story on him about his communication with the LSU coaches, but I mean, what's your take on their quarterback situation in 2018?
Well, the one thing I did ask Dinkelman what he thought about the situation this year with them taking 2 quarterbacks and, what they like to do in the class. And he didn't seem too interested in being in a situation where too many, every kid says the same thing where they say they know they got to compete for, their job. But I mean, generally, when you're supposed to be the marquee quarterback in a class, you can have a certain expectation that, you're going to be the only quarterback taken, especially with, all the other ones that LSU has taken so far. By the way, I thought Miles Brennan, from what I saw at the opening, showed pretty well for himself, don't you?
Yeah, I think he did really well. I think, honestly,
he's going to be the better. Do you think he's the better option than Narcisse? I feel like I know what your answer is there.
Yeah. I mean, I was not. Let's just say I was not. I have not been high on Narcisse now, dating back. He's coming off an injury. I think that's tough. So we kind of cut him some slack in the beginning of the spring when he was up and down at the camp in New Orleans. He then came to the 5-Star Challenge. I think was the consensus worst quarterback there of the guys we had. And then, of course, as I mentioned at the camp, I mean, I would have put him in that group of Tuttle, Rogers, Maiden. I'd put him 4th of those 4. So I think Brennan's stock is on the rise. I think he fits what LSU does a little bit better than Narcisse. I'm not sure. I just don't know about Narcisse, especially as a pure passer. And I think that's the kind of feedback we've gotten from, the coaches we have that work our events are, former NFL and college guys. And, they kind of had their questions about Narcisse as well. So
let's say Brennan has some staying power, shows well, and maxes out his potential, and and LSU continues to want to take 2 quarterbacks next year. I mean, Dinkelman, I saw him at the state 7-on-7 tournament. That was the only time I've had the opportunity to see him. It's funny. He plays for a small school, and like during halftime, he would go off to a separate tent, and he had he almost had he had like a prep staff. He had a guy telling him what the defense was doing at the 7-on-7 tournament. He had a towel person, kind of somebody giving him water. He looked like he had like a cornerman in a boxing ring, basically, at halftime.
Oh, jeez.
And and I mean, he was good. He kind of throws an easy pass, and he kind of has like a similar sort of personality. So. I don't know if the killer instinct for him to like want to fight for a job at LSU as the only quarterback in his class is something that's kind of like in his makeup. But also there's a lot of concern too that his uncle is Ty Detmer, who has now taken over as the OC at BYU. So there's speculation there. No matter what he says, if he's gonna, if that has anything to do with his feelings on his recruitment or not. So, But I think now, if more, I mean, it's not even unique to him. It's just any quarterback, right? The more bodies you put into a class at that position, the less interested you are about staying committed there, I'm sure.
Right. So that's what we think about that. Quick Ty Detmer story before we move on to talk about Texas. Actually, when I was a kid, I went to a game with my father where BYU came to play Oregon there in Eugene. I think BYU was pretty highly ranked. Ty Detmer was the quarterback. I think that was around the time he was vying for the Heisman and national titles and whatnot. And boy, my dad really let him have it during that game in terms of heckling from the from the stands. That was a time in Eugene where the stands weren't very full, and boy, my dad must have said, "Lay down and die, Ty," like about
Wow.
100, a
He went
hundred
straight for
times.
it.
Yeah, he did not mess around. So if you see Ty Detmer, make sure you tell him to lay down and die. See what he says. See what he says about that. I'm gonna look up that game's box score, by the way, while we're talking Texas. You went to Texas's camp, I believe.
Wait.
They came over.
Before we get into that, I should tell you, I forgot to bring this up when we were talking earlier about commitments. Four-star running back Toneil Carter commits to Georgia, and which I'm sure you're familiar with. Have you
Oh yeah.
do you have any strong opinions about that and the tradition of running back that we continue to feed into here over at the University of Georgia?
Well, I'm not sure because our a friend of the podcast, Dell McGee, is the running backs coach. Came from Georgia Southern, where he obviously was high on our radar because we follow them closely during the season for whatever reason. Um, he and I were actually buddies because we'd see each other at a lot of games, go have meals and stuff like that. And I know we talked about a lot of running backs. And Carter never came up, which I thought was odd. They've been on Cam Akers, they've been in on Najee Harris. I know they were looking at Trey Sermon from Georgia, who's committed to Oklahoma. They like DeAndre Swift. I think what's going to break down is they'll get Carter, they'll get DeAndre Swift. Ty Chandler from Tennessee is another guy they were looking at. But they're basically in a position where they can take two running backs every year. I expect Sony Michel to go to the draft. I expect Nick Chubb to go to the draft whenever he comes back, if he's back in time. He'll be back definitely by the first few games, even if he doesn't make it right out of the gate. So that basically leaves them with Elijah Holyfield and two guys who have a chance to come right in and play right away. We've seen, even with Chubb and Michel, and then before that with Gurley and Marshall, they're not afraid to play freshmen. So uh, I don't remember seeing Carter except maybe at Future 50. I don't think he's quite on the level of Akers and guys like that, though. Do you?
No, well, he's been real difficult. He's been one of these. He's been a recruiting ghost for me because I haven't been, even though we follow each other on Twitter, he hasn't responded to repeated DM attempts for interviews on my part, and so I didn't really have a feel for him. I think people expected him to go to Texas A&M. A&M, of course, has the commitment from Etienne from Louisiana, and they have a lot of running backs on their roster right now. So Carter might have taken a look at that and said, "Hey, Georgia plays their kids early. They got a new coach from Alabama. This is Alabama 2.0 over there, and I'm going to run the ball like crazy." And so that was probably the decision-making process for him. So, but I think it's a good pickup nonetheless, even though that's pure speculation on my part.
Well, I'm sure you'll get out and see him during the year with your extensive travel schedule. I know you're planning on seeing a lot of games in the fall like we always do, except you got to make your own schedule this year, which is got to be a new challenge for you, as oftentimes you piggyback off of my scheduling.
Yeah. Well, I've already started. I got a couple of key matchups in the books that I know I'm going to go see, and I'll if anybody's interested, I'll make a note I'll write it all out on a note on my phone and post it to my Twitter, and then I'll sign the bottom
Yeah.
of it.
It's interesting. The signing thing is really an interesting wrinkle that a lot of people have taken, but we don't have to talk about that right now. Let's get into Texas. You went to their camp, aptly called Friday Night Lights, real original name.
No, it was Under the Lights because it was on
Oh,
Saturday night. It wasn't on
oh,
Friday.
okay. Oh, it was Saturday Night Lights. It
No.
was under the light. It was. It wasn't. Listen, I'm calling it Friday Night Lights. I don't care what day of the week it is. Texas fans, I'm sure you'll like that. But anyway, so Under the Lights. You were there under the lights. I know you ran into a lot of our former cohorts out there, and you had a chance to see a lot. What was your impression of that Texas camp? How was it run? You and I have been to a lot of camps over the years. Famously, we had an incident last year, a dog night at Georgia, where we really kind of swore off camps forever. I think after that, we were both so mad. And that's happened. That's happened twice in 4 years. Speaking of which, Georgia got rid of dog night this year. They didn't have it. So what was your take though on Texas and how it stack up and how everything was run?
Well, I mean, there certainly weren't as many kids as there was at the dog night camps that we've been to. It's a smaller group. I mean, it was still a large group, but it was a smaller group because they did everything just on the one field in the stadium, and so it was easy to. I mean, it was cool. Like the media and couldn't be down on the field, but I mean, it's not like the stands were so crowded. It wasn't an issue to get kind of an elevated view when there's that many kids on the camp surface. Getting a little bit of an elevated view is advantageous anyway. So you got to see they did skill position drills for a little while, and then they did one-on-ones. Then they broke back into positions for a short session, and then did another short session of one-on-ones with some of the guys they were more serious at taking looks at, I think. So but I thought it was a pretty well run camp. The weather was beautiful. That was my first chance seeing the stadium, so I enjoyed it immensely relative to our experiences at Dog Night for sure.
What was the situation with, I mean, were you allowed to talk to players? What did they let you do? Did you shoot video? What were you allowed to do out there?
They allowed us to talk to the players after the camp was over as they were leaving, but we weren't allowed to talk to them, around registration. And then obviously we weren't down on the field, so that wasn't an option to talk to them as the camp was going on. But, it was, I mean, if you knew who you were looking for after the camp, it was kind of a bottleneck scenario when they were coming out. So you just had to grab the kids that you wanted to see. I thought a few kids helped their stock and even picked up an offer. I just did an update on Jarrell Cherry, who's a defensive end, kind of linebacker hybrid. And in the one-on-ones, he was, he wasn't coming off the line with his hand on the ground. He was just doing the edge rush sort of thing that that we've seen some guys do. But he was real impressive. He picked up an offer afterwards. Caden Stern picked up an offer, who's a guy that we saw at Prime 21 a little while ago, and I think has been very impressive in the events that I've seen him in. Chasen Hines is an offensive lineman, picked up an offer. And he did very well in the one-on-ones. He wasn't a guy I was familiar with before. And then Stanley Lambert, a receiver, and Tanza Wagner, who was also at Prime 21. So it was a pretty good. Oh, defensive back Josh Thompson, cornerback who really upped his stock this spring, was committed to TCU, flipped after the camp, and is now committed to Texas too. And he had a pretty nice showing for himself in the one-on-ones too.
So when you're talking to these kids, how much are they really looking at this season coming up and kind of being like, okay, this is, I need to see, this from Texas to make sure that I'm making the right decision. Has that been discussed? I mean, are kids
I don't
talking
think.
about Charlie?
No, I think we've got somehow the perception of Texas got back to where the wins and losses aren't the focal point in considering them. It's more about the brand again, and so I think that's been the main point of attraction to the kids that have been considering them. The only kid that I can see that being the situation with was the tight end that they just had decommit a little while ago and was taking visits to Alabama, and Major Tennyson is his name, and he was taking visits to Alabama and Oklahoma State, and I think he was probably looking at it from a an early success rate sort of point of view in order for him to be looking around, and then he just decided to decommit anyway, and he'll be moving on. But I mean, generally, I think kids really love Charlie Strong, and I think they're considering the brand now. And Charlie's made an effort to hire coaches that have strong Texas high school football ties, and aren't too far removed from their careers there. So I think he's really making a different effort on the recruiting front, and the camp couldn't have been better, especially for some of these kids that picked up offers.
All right, so that wraps up our recruiting talk. We have 40 solid minutes, depending on how much you edit out, Nick, of you stumbling over your words, but at least a solid 40. Let's get into rants and recommendations. I've been gone for God knows how long. I got a lot of stuff to complain about. So first, let's start with you. I know you wanted to talk. You want to complain first? Let's get, because you have a recruiting related complaint. So I think we should start with that.
Well, we mentioned how we have rankings updates coming up for the next for 2017 and 2018. So this is the time of my life, where I watch a lot of highlight film to make sure that those rankings are where I want them to be. But here's the deal, man. And I know we talk about the kids not really listening to this podcast. Maybe the parents do that have kids that play football. And if you're putting together a highlight video, do two things for me. If it's a receiver and he's high pointing the ball or making the catch, don't pause the highlight reel the moment that he makes the catch. Spot shadow the kid before the thing gets started so I can watch him run his route, make the catch, and end the play. I don't need to, the point that you stop it when he's making the catch, obviously it's going to be him that I'm looking at. So don't let the play run out, And the other thing, too, is if you're a defensive back or somebody that has some sort of special teams merit, this is just personal preference at this point. I really don't want to see you blocking field goal attempts or running them back in. The second I see everybody lined up for a field goal, I know what the highlight's going to be. Let's just go to the next one.
Well, my main complaint is just start with the plays. I don't need, flashcards of your nickname and, all these other accolades and this, that, and a third. I mean,
Well, the contact information might be helpful in some cases.
Yeah. But if the first play doesn't start till like the 27-second mark, I'm really irritated by that point. And if I know, I was actually talking with someone on the phone about it today. Coaches only watch about 3 plays anyway. So if you're eating up 30 seconds with your, the beast or, like whatever. What did I see? I saw one the other day that really made me laugh. Anyway, your self-proclaimed nickname and everything like that. I just get to just play the film. If you want to make a cool video to show your friends and your family at Thanksgiving with a bunch of cool effects, put it on YouTube. And we'll embed it on our site because that's what we have the capability to do. So anyway, that's how I feel about that. I'm with you on that one. So I don't have as many specific play pet peeves as you do, but just let's get to it. Cut to the chase already. Speaking of which, now that I've been home, I've been telling you how excited I have been to be at my house. I'm unpacking. I just moved. I got yard work to do, but I've been going to the local La Fitness, trying to get some time in on the treadmill and whatnot to lose this camp season weight I've put on. And boy, it's an epidemic, Nick, with these people talking on their phones while at the gym. When did this start? Did I miss this during my 1-year hiatus from the gym? Did all of a sudden people just decide that I'm working out, I'm just going to talk really loud on my cell phone the whole time? Or what do you think?
Well, listen, for a lot of these people that go to the gym, it's all for superficial purposes anyway. So if you're going to the gym and talking loudly about what you did on Friday night and so on and so forth because you want people to hear about how cool you are, then, and also look at how good you look, then I say it goes hand in hand, don't you?
Yeah, but if I'm the gym, if I'm working there, you got to start cracking down. I mean, we got to have a no phones policy in terms of talking. I know people got to take selfies. It doesn't count if you went to the gym if you didn't take a picture of yourself. Leg day, etc. Seems like leg day is every day of the week, by the way, if I'm going based on my social media feed. But that's a whole nother story. Just don't talk on the phone at the gym, please. It's so annoying. I got a phone call yesterday.
I was gonna say the number one thing with talking on the phone at the gym that gets me is like when people are between, let's say they're doing not on the Stairmaster, they're lifting weights or whatever, and they're using a bench. If you go at like 6 p.m. at night when everybody's done working and they're hitting the gym, but like you do, sometimes people have been known to share the same bench or whatever in between, and alternate sets and all that. But the people that go there and sit on the bench while they're cooling down between sets, talking on the phone, and you never know when they're going to get into their next one, and they just sit there forever. Boy, that's a real bad one.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Although we all know I don't do a whole lot of weightlifting.
Your country's strong, so
yeah, I got dad strength now. I'm old enough that I don't have any kids, but I still got dad strength. So if you need me to lift a couch, I'm there for you. If you need me to lift some weights, I don't know. Like it's middling results. In terms of recommendations, I don't know. I mean, it's been a long time on the road. I went to a lot of restaurants I liked in a lot of cities. I don't know if I have any specific recommendations on that front. I haven't been watching a whole lot of TV. So you got something? Maybe I can think of something in the meantime.
I went to go see the new Ghostbusters movie, and that was, I'm not necessarily going to recommend it, but it wasn't as horrible as I think people were expecting or hoping it to be. So there's that.
Well, only misogynists like you were hoping it would be horrible, expecting it to be horrible. I thought it would be better because I had women in it.
I'm just I'm just a mouthpiece for the internet at this point. But also I will say I just binge watched Stranger Things on Netflix, which features Winona Ryder as one of the main characters and her grand resurgence straight back to the top by means of a successful Netflix series. But it was kind of like do you remember the movie Special 8, or the one with the kids
Super
in the
8.
Super 8. Yeah, it had a similar sort of vibe to that in terms of story and it was a period thing. They had a lot of good 80s music that sounded like the Knight Rider theme and stuff like that. Original soundtrack though. I thought it was a very good show.
Yeah, it seems like it's been getting a lot of buzz on social media and the like. I've definitely heard a lot of people talking about how much they like it. So yeah, I would say check that out. I think it's on my list of shows to watch. I actually, what did I watch recently? Well, I've been watching some bad TV as of late. Fear the Walking Dead, which is just a brutal show.
When does the regular one come back on again? Because I don't know when that's supposed to start up again.
Sometime, yeah, I think it's usually like October or something like that. I think we got more Fear the Walking Dead, by the way, is just basically completely ripped off. I mean, season 2 of Fear the Walking Dead is exactly like season 2 of Walking Dead, which is crazy. And then I actually watched the first episode of Orphan Black yesterday, which is a show on BBC America, which I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed that. So,
yeah, my wife was into that for a period of time. I watched my fair share of that.
Yeah, I'm only one episode in, but I would say that would be my mini
So you're an
recommendation.
expert?
Yeah. You know how it is. I see one. It's like when you travel to a place for 2 days and then you tell people not to go there ever again, which is not something not something I would do.
You only watch 3 plays and a highlight video for a kid, and you watch one episode, and then the decision's made.
That's right. Well, guess what? I watched one episode of Preacher, and I could tell you what. Now, you might like it, by the way, but it's a real
Preacher
a lot
doesn't
of
stand a
fighting.
prayer.
Yeah, no, that's gonna need some prayers to get picked up for a second season if I'm making the decision. It reminds me of that show. What was that show you and Jared liked so much that was on Showtime or Cinemax?
The Banshee.
Banshee. It's definitely got some Banshee vibes to it, so you might like it. But for me, it's a little too crass. I don't like the gratuitous blood and guts and etc. So anyway, there's your TV talk for this week. I guess that wraps it up. We've been Nick, you're headed to the Olympics.
That's right.
Hopefully, you got all your shots. I know you're going to the dentist today. You got everything in order to go down there and cover the Olympics.
I don't think so. Not really. But I'm just gonna wing it. How hard can it be down there?
Yeah, Nick survived the Sochi games in Russia, which we had a lot of controversy headed into. So I think he can go down. He'll be covering Team Canada for Yahoo Canada,
and a little bit of USA, from what I understand. I'll hope to be at one of the Team USA basketball games, if nothing else, and one of their soccer games.
Well, they're not in the soccer tournament, unfortunately.
Oh, they're not? Oh, well, good.
Yeah,
that narrows down.
Hopefully, you get to go to see the women play, though. Our girl Christine Press is set to play a prominent role on the team now with some of the roster changes. So you can follow Nick at Rivals Krug City. If you're still listening to this, we should have plugged these way earlier. I'm at Rivals Woody. Rob Cassidy, who is somewhere in Colorado fishing, which is definitely off-brand for him. I don't know if what's that company with the whale, the clothes he wears all the time, Vineyard Vines. I don't know if they make like fishing slickers or whatever, or like wading boots to go into the fly fishing in Colorado.
They're just seersucker.
Right. Exactly. You can follow him at Cassidy_Rob. Please email us, rivalspodcast@yahoo.com. We're going to start taking more listener questions as we shift into the fall. We're going to do a little bit more formatted show. So any feedback you'd like to give us, reach us there. And Nick, enjoy Brazil. We'll hear you back in a few, I guess, three or 4 weeks. When are you coming back?
I come back on August 22nd, but once I get the lay of the land out there and figure out what exactly my workload is going to be on a day-to-day basis and how much extra time I have available, it's only 2 hours. It's only 1 hour ahead of Eastern time from when I'll be down there. So there might be an opportunity if we play around with some Skype or something to see, if we might be able to keep up with this while I'm down there, but we'll see.
Okay, all right. Well, have fun, and we'll be back. Rob and I'll be back with an episode next week, produced by me, which I'm sure will be a fun adventure. So, anyway, thanks for listening. M. Deuce, our boy, you can find him on SoundCloud. We'll go ahead and play us out as usual.